Good morning, folks. This is John Cogan. I'm the CEO of Proformative, the online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. First, I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar entitled Current and Emerging Cloud Trends. It's no longer if, it's how. We are reaching a tipping point in the widespread adoption of cloud-based systems and infrastructure, not only in the area of finance and accounting systems, but in IT consumption across the enterprise. Questions around moving finance and accounting to the cloud are increasingly focused around how to do it, when to do it, instead of whether it should be done at all. However, there's still a lot of confusion surrounding cloud computing and software as a service, where their real value lies, and how and why companies are and are not adopting them. This webinar will offer an assessment of the current state of the union in the arena of cloud computing adoption and a review of the results of a recent Proformative Cloud Computing Survey, which offers insights into which areas finance and accounting professionals need more education on regarding the potential rewards and risks of moving accounting, finance, and related operations into the cloud. Today you'll be hearing from a couple folks who are fairly steeped in the cloud. One of them is myself, another one is brought to us courtesy of NetSuite. And a quick note on today's agenda. I will start today's webinar with the results of the 2012 Current and Emerging Cloud Trends Survey, and then we'll hear a presentation from an expert in the area of cloud solutions, and then we'll move to a question and answer segment where we will spend the remainder of our time. We would like this to be an interactive experience for you, so if you wouldn't mind taking a quick glance at your GoToWebinar control panel, you should see a little area there entitled Questions. We are happy to answer your questions. Now, we typically wait until the very end of the presentation to answer your questions, but if you have them, please feel free to toss them in there at any time, and then we'll get to them during the Q&A period at the end of today's presentation. I already have a question that says, can we get copies of the slide deck? Absolutely. In fact, a copy of this full presentation is already out on Proformative. Simply do a search on the site for the title of today's presentation, and you will find it as what we call a resource up on Proformative, obviously free, like everything we do on Proformative. We will also send out an email after the event. It will have a link to the presentation. So we definitely want you to make it easier for you to see what's going on. We have a couple of people saying they're having some volume issues here. I am kind of shouting into my phone right now, so hopefully that's temporary and will improve. Keep letting me know if it doesn't, and I can switch phones. We are offering CPE credits for the CPAs in today's audience. In order to do that, we will have to stop today's slides twice, briefly, to present two poll questions. We will take about 1 minute for each poll question. Even if you're not interested in CPE credit, we'd love to get your answers on those poll questions, just to see where you stand, see where our audience stands on a couple of cloud issues. Let's see. Let's go ahead and, okay, I'm getting a bunch of people saying no problem with the volume, so I guess my shouting isn't hurting. At this point, let's go ahead and welcome everyone to Proformative, and we'll get into today's program. So quickly, for folks who are not familiar with Proformative, we are the largest and fastest growing online resource for senior level corporate finance, treasury, accounting, and related professionals. Proformative is completely ad-free and noise-free. I like to say it's the most boring online community on the web. All we do is learn from one another. It's an amazing resource filled with peers and subject matter experts. And the beautiful thing is it's all free and it's noise-free. We have no ads on the site. We don't allow any self-promotion. It's just a wonderful exchange of ideas. So feel free to check us out at proformative.com. Today, a few learning objectives. Bottom line is we'd love to update everyone on sort of current state of the union on the adoption of cloud computing and related technology. We'll talk about some of the capabilities of the cloud and software as a service, which happen to be related but not identical concepts. And hopefully you'll come away from this event simply being better prepared to understand how you and your company can benefit from the cloud, or what your major concerns should be in looking at cloud solutions. So without further ado, why don't we go ahead and hop into the trend survey results. I usually introduce each speaker with a bio, so I'll give a 10-second bio on myself here. I'm a 20-year finance and accounting professional. I've been a CFO 4 times. I was a VP of Finance at Cardinal Health, so I've been at companies that were huge, like Cardinal Health, Allied Signal and Cisco, and tiny, and love what I do. And I happen to be a bit of a geek as well. So the cloud and me work really well together. So we'll hear a little bit more about that later. All right, let's go ahead and hop into our cloud survey discussion. First off, this is the second year we've done this survey. The first year we did this survey, 2010, we learned a lot about where finance and accounting professionals were on cloud technology. First off, what we drew from that survey was that the cloud was delivering higher ROI than expected, which was amazing because that's pretty rare for technology implementation. It increased collaboration significantly. We've actually seen that trend increase in this year's results. Provided greater confidence in systems. Now, this was interesting. The biggest question that non-cloud adopters had was whether they could have confidence in cloud-based systems at all. And what we learned was that people who had adopted the cloud actually had greater confidence in their systems than when they were in-house systems. And generally, the business value to adopters was high, and it was high along a whole bunch of axes, and we'll look at some of those angles today. CFOs and other finance leaders also thought cloud and SaaS would be critical to their companies over the next few years. They could tell that even if they hadn't adopted it. There was enough buzz and enough promise. A lot of folks felt like they were behind the curve, needed to be educated. We actually ran a bunch of cloud education events last year, and they were very well attended and well received. And they thought that cloud and SaaS could really reduce IT CapEx and OpEx, as well as create a direct link between IT consumption and cost. And we'll see when we look at this year's results how these thoughts have progressed in some very interesting ways. So what's new in 2011? One of the core things that I find most interesting is that the shift has, amongst adopters, has gone from cost savings towards speed, scalability, and collaboration. So in the early days, one of the great promises of SaaS and cloud was cost savings, the idea that you wouldn't have to have as many IT professionals managing your infrastructure, the idea that these applications that you were implementing would save you money, CapEx and OpEx. Well, all of that does happen by and large to be very true. But the fact is it's being overshadowed by the speed, scalability, and collaboration that companies see when they adopt the cloud. So that is an amazing thing. Also, the maturation of technology has happened very quickly and has pivoted questions away from a focus on data security. That was, for the last 2 years, the #1 concern amongst finance leaders that I spoke to and amongst the finance leaders who took our survey. So data security, it's always a risk, obviously, but there simply haven't been that many data breaches from cloud and SaaS companies. You know, you read about them rarely, but you're probably more likely to read about in-house systems being breached. And in the last year, it's taken a dramatic turn away from concerns about data security. Now people are far more interested in what can this do for me. Quick note about the survey. We'll talk about the demographics in just a moment. This survey has been designed to quantify the current state of affairs and thoughts amongst our user base, the performative user base, corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. Most of our users are managers, directors, VPs, and CXXs. We welcome everyone, of course, but this survey actually does have a predominantly senior bent to it. Let's take a quick look at the specific demographics. Survey was responded to by almost 400 folks. You can see the breakout of seniority here. So almost half were VP and CXX, and then you can see director, manager, and individuals. We crossed all industries, which is fairly typical for Performative since we are industry agnostic. As a platform, our users tend to be as well. Company size, we had many multi-billion-dollar Fortune 100 companies, as well as everything from startups. So we ran the gamut there. And the functional areas, no surprise, 70% plus, actually roughly 80%, was finance, accounting, treasury related. We did have actually a fair number of IT professionals weighing in as well. And let's look now at the key survey results. Number one, what were people's thoughts of the benefits, the main benefits in moving to cloud applications and their relative significance? These top two I find are very closely related. Number one there is scalability without infrastructure build-up. Scalability without infrastructure really translates to speed, and that happens to be the second item there, increase my company's ability to respond quickly. That is a very critical aspect of the cloud. It allows you to very quickly scale up or scale down your resources, and without an ounce of IT input, very frequently you can implement very large software applications and see results very quickly. So it's actually not surprising to those of us who have adopted the cloud that these would be the number 1 and 2 items. Now 3 and 4 are reduce my company's CapEx and reduce my company's operating expenses, both as related to IT expenditures. So those continue to be strong, but they used to be the top items. Now they're not the top items. Top concerns in moving to the cloud. May put my company or customer data at greater risk. So of course, those of us in finance, accounting, and related areas are hugely risk averse. It's very natural that this is the top item. But as we'll point out later, it's less of a top item than it used to be. So still the greatest concern, rightly so, nothing more important than your company or customer data when it comes to systems. And of course, that's still the greatest risk, but that has dropped significantly. The other items are have also dropped over the last year. May increase my company's IT risk. Most people who have implemented cloud systems actually find that the opposite is true. And then you can see the last two there. Finally, greatest benefits and relevant significance realized by companies already operating in the cloud. Number 1, anytime, anywhere access. This is an amazing thing. A small company can suddenly be a global company without a large IT infrastructure program. It is the power of the web. If you can log on anywhere in the world, you can get access to all of your applications. That's nice. Easier and faster deployments, no question about it. I speak to CFOs almost for a living, and there are many stories about CFOs implementing a system a month for 6 months or a year. They're that easy. They're simply replacing their core corporate infrastructure, everything from ERP to CPM to CRM, you name it, and they're doing it quickly and easily and ending up with much better results than they had with monolithic in-house systems in the past. So that speed is incredibly powerful. Easier, more frequent upgrades and enhancements. It's wonderful. You're no longer stuck. When I was at Cisco many years ago in the late 90s, we were stuck on Oracle 10.4. We were like 3 or 4 generations behind. And this is not a knock on Oracle. This is just that any large company upgrading an in-house system was this epochal event. It was incredibly difficult to do, time-consuming and expensive. And these days, the changes happen in the background. Nothing breaks, virtually nothing breaks. It's so much easier, and you just wake up, on Monday, and you have new capabilities. It's an incredible thing. Increased collaboration. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. That is significant, and of course, there's CapEx reduction again. So clearly, CapEx goes way down when you're using these systems. Next up, a few more results. Cloud applications currently utilized. So we asked our users which cloud applications are folks using these days. Client relationship management, CRM, that came in number 1, and that's not a surprise. Salesforce.com has been the leader in this space. There are many, many Fortune 50 companies, all the way down to mom and pops who are using Salesforce.com. Pretty broadly adopted. Collaboration, the 3 C's here, is next up. This is things like Box.net, Dropbox, Microsoft SharePoint servers, things that help people communicate more quickly and easily across enterprises. ERP, number 3, that's actually really interesting because ERP are the family jewels of most companies. It typically has deep customer information. It certainly typically includes financial information. So a lot of companies are making the big move into the cloud with ERP systems, and then you can see the rest. And then we asked, where do people intend to be moving over the next 12 months? And you can see human resource management. And there are a number of companies that have come out of the woodwork over the last 3 years with cloud-based HR management, everything from people management to company strategy and goal management applications, and those are proving very interesting. CRM, still a hot item, collaboration, and then you can see the rest of the list. A couple other notable survey results. 72% of respondents agreed that cloud computing and SaaS will be very important to their companies over the next 12 months. That's a bigger number than it's been in the past. So this is not, I think this is beyond a trend at this point. This is just happening. And the vast majority of respondents reported their companies have or are in the process of moving into cloud applications. Other notable items, those who identified putting company or customer data at risk as a high priority fell by 9% year over year. That's a significant drop, so that just speaks to the fact that folks who are living in the cloud have actually realized better security, fewer breaches, fewer issues, and I guess it's proving it by doing it. Next, for those who identified increased collaboration as a primary benefit, rose by 9% year over year. And that's something that anyone who lives in the cloud has seen. The collaboration benefits are significant. The number of survey respondents who indicated the cloud would be very important for their company increased by 16% year over year. So almost everyone's on board, and now folks are really trying to figure out how we do this. And then those who identified CapEx reduction as a primary benefit declined 8% year over year. And just speaking as a heavy cloud user at a couple of companies here, it's not that there's no CapEx reduction. The CapEx reduction is significant. It's just no longer thought of as the biggest benefit. There are so many other benefits that overshadow that, and that's actually an interesting thing because you have to ask yourself, for a finance or accounting professional to say that something other than cash is really important, that's probably an important thing to focus on. Let's see, a couple quick survey conclusions. I think we've hit most of this already. Cloud computing is improving strategic decisions that go way beyond cost savings. Adoption of cloud will only continue accelerating in 2012. HRM and CRM are going to be the leading areas in 2012 according to the numbers that we saw. There's access to the full survey report. There's a link. Actually, you can also search for the survey on our site, and you'll find it. Or if you pull down this presentation off of our site, there's an active link in it, and you can go to find the full survey report there. So please feel free to do that. On a more personal note, I thought I'd add a little insight from someone who has worked in a lot of technology companies as a finance executive, and lets you see what's going on at Proformative and amongst other tech companies that I'm familiar with because I know the CFOs or CEOs of those companies. Number one, our company lives entirely in the cloud. And so here we are, a technology company whose primary product is a website, and we don't own a server. We have nothing but employee laptops, and we have access to tons of servers, more bandwidth, and more computing power than you could ever imagine or need. We just turn it on and off as we need it. In fact, yesterday my CTO came in and said, hey, we need to turn on 3 more test servers for some new web development work we're doing, and you wouldn't believe how cheap it is. It cost us a few $100s to turn that on. Suddenly all of our engineers were connected to them. And in the past, you would have had to go out, buy, or lease a whole bunch of servers. It would have taken you weeks to get them, maybe months to configure them. Instead, we had it up and running in maybe 30 minutes. That's just amazing. And I don't care if you're a large company or a small company, that's an incredible thing. We have accounting systems, our planning system, our entire website, our email systems, T&E, payroll, and many other systems are all out on the web. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Also, all of our development is out on the web. So that's interesting. Our developers don't use in-house servers. They use third-party servers. We rent them. One month we might have 20 of those servers running. The next month we might have 13 of those servers running. We literally just turn them on and off as we need them. We pay for them as we need them. And when we don't need them, we're not paying a cent. It's as easy as buying apps. Anyone who has a smartphone will understand this. It actually just changes your mindset as a finance or accounting leader. Suddenly, if you see that someone has written an application that you can adopt, maybe it's T&E, maybe it's treasury management, maybe it's payroll management. Once you're used to the idea of, hey, I can get these applications up and running easily, quickly, and very cheaply without IT interference, and my own people can manage and configure them, suddenly it opens up a whole new world for you. And if you see an app that makes sense for your company, you think, oh, I can adopt that, and I can do it quickly and easily and cheaply. It's just a completely different mindset. The collaboration effect, I want to talk about this for a moment. It's actually kind of hard to explain. I guess we all collaborated back in the day when our biggest tool was Excel, and we would email Excel spreadsheets around. But the difference between doing that and being on a conference call with 8 people and you're sharing a Google spreadsheet where everyone can make changes at one time, see what's going on at the same time, that's just apples and oranges. It is actually kind of difficult to put into words, but once you live with it, it's pretty hard to imagine living without it. And we, like other companies who live in the cloud, are utterly global. So we happen to be a distributed company already. We've got a lot of people in Silicon Valley, but we've got folks across the country as well. And it just doesn't matter where people are. In fact, we have a development team in Southeast Asia, and they have the same access to our systems that we have. Now it's completely secured. We control it. And like most systems on the cloud, you can completely meter who gets access to what. That's one thing that the cloud has really figured out, is very specific user access control. But there are no barriers to expansion. There's no IT consideration at all when it comes to thinking about where we can go next. And that's a great thing. And somehow or other, this all costs us less than the cost of a couple servers a year. We have no IT infrastructure at all. People self-serve. It's just a faster-moving place, and it's a place that has less overhead and fewer barriers. It's amazing. I hear stories of this happening at companies huge and tiny. There's just no reason not to be looking at these solutions right now. One analogy I like to bring is smartphones versus old phones. They call those old phones feature phones for some reason. I guess they came with 4 features, and that's all you can ever get on an old phone. And sure, they did their core things well, but if you wanted something to change, well, you had to throw your phone out and get another phone. For those who use smartphones, there are these things called apps. You can download them when you find them useful, and you implement them very quickly and easily, and then suddenly your phone has new capability, and you just don't even think twice about it once you've updated your phone and have that new capability. And that's the new world of cloud applications. And the largest enterprises are getting into the cloud. The primary barriers now are will. Do companies want to go there? Do they have the vision? Do they understand the benefits? Maybe there aren't benefits. Maybe your system is so tuned that it can't possibly get better. But for most folks, that's not the case. The question is the will to move there, and is the education there? Do folks understand what's available? Of course, you're always battling sunk costs. It's very difficult to convince a company that sunk $100 million into a customized ERP system that maybe there's something else out there that's better, or perhaps you're not doing a forklift change. Maybe you swap out pieces of that system as it makes sense. But battling sunk costs is definitely a tough issue. And then lastly, imagination. Like most finance people, I'm something of a spreadsheet jockey, and I used to think, oh, if I can think about a mathematical solution logically, then that should translate to Excel. So if someone explains something to me and says, well, can you do that in Excel? If it was logical and within sort of the capabilities of Excel, I could say, yes, give me some time and we can get that done. These days, the cloud is very similar. There are a lot of applications. If you're attuned to that, if you're open to that, then suddenly you say, wow, could we put all of our supply chain purchasing into the cloud? Well, yes, you can do that. There are probably 80 to 100 systems that would allow you to do that. And all you need is the will and the imagination to go after it, and you can get it done. So that's a wonderful thing. That's it for my piece of this presentation. We have a couple questions queued up. I'd like to encourage people to continue asking questions as we go here. So we love to get to those, and we will get to them as soon as we get to the Q&A section after the next section of our event. But first, we'd like to take a quick poll. We're going to leave this open very briefly, but let us know, does your company run significant finance and accounting applications in the cloud? You could almost call that any finance and accounting applications in the cloud, because what finance and accounting apps are not significant? But do you run ERP? Do you run budgeting and planning software in the cloud? Do you run treasury management, et cetera? Would love to just get a quick look at how our users are or are not using, or whether they are or are not using cloud-based applications. And we'll revisit this when we get to our Q&A. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and close that down. Thank you very much. And let's go ahead and hop to the next section. And with that, I would love to introduce our next speaker, Paul Turner. Paul is a senior director at NetSuite. Paul has implemented and defined strategy for financial software applications for the past 15 years in senior product strategy, product management, software implementation, and channel roles. Prior to NetSuite at Hyperion, which is now part of Oracle, Paul was responsible for its financial consolidation, budgeting, planning, and business intelligence technology strategy and roadmap. He also has worked on a number of financial planning, analytics, and reporting implementations at Fortune 500 companies. Also, at Talentis Software, Paul worked on integrating sales and finance departments on sales commission deployments and providing sales performance analytics at major telcos and insurance companies. So with that introduction, Paul, please take it away.
Hey, thanks very much, John, and thanks for sharing those poll results. I realized when you read my bio there, John, that it's actually 16 years now, so I'm starting to feel my age now. So
I'll make sure to make that addition.
You know, yeah, just the hair loss is even worse at this point. So, so thanks for everyone for joining the event. Actually, what I wanted to do actually to share with you today was a number of different areas around the cloud, and I typically speak to about 2 to 3 finance executives or CFOs every week, and get a lot of consistent feedback about their opinion on the cloud, and for those that have moved to the cloud for some of their applications of the business, some of the benefits or some of the reasons they've done so. What I was going to share in this presentation was just a couple of things. The first is just some of the drivers for on-premise ERP versus the cloud. Some of the typical frustrations with on-premise ERP, and up until now, there's really not been much of an alternative to deploying your systems on-premise. And so, what some of those drivers are, as well as where businesses are planning to make their spend over the next few years. And then, kind of looking forward, actually, some of the trends that we're seeing, and I think you might find this kind of interesting in terms of what some of the key trends that we're seeing that are going to kind of unfurl over the next 3 or 4 years. Some of the trends that the cloud is driving, as well as some of the technology trends that are also at play as well. And a lot of these are going to have some pretty profound implications to how you manage your financials, as well as how the finance team is structured as well as some of the vendors you engage with too. And the final area is, John touched on this very well, which is some of the things you really need to look out for when buying or working with a cloud vendor. There are a lot of vendors out there, and so you really need to make sure that you ask the right questions. So what I've actually done is I've actually shared some of the questions that are provided by Gartner around that. So some of the key questions that they highlight where you need to drill into with any vendor that you speak to, and it just makes sure that you can be protected and you're in good shape when you roll these things out and down the line. So with that, so just want to kind of say this should be for any of you kind of ERP diehards out there. These kind of numbers should really come of no surprise. In some cases, a little bit kind of conservative, but some of the reality of some of the on-premise systems we've been living with all of these years. The first one is, when for every dollar you spend, on that upfront license with your on-premise system, the upfront spend, there's a lot of hidden cost around that. So, Forrester sizes it up to 5x. It can be anything between 3x, 4x, 5x of downstream spend that you're going to spend on maintaining the application, whether it's just the pure maintenance aspect, which is typically 20% of the license, but all the way through to the hardware upgrades, availability, backups, FTEs devoted to maintain this application. So what you typically see is there's basically a huge kind of hidden cost around deploying on-premise, and this can have a pretty substantial effect on where you're spending your IT dollars. The second area is a lot of those investments that businesses made in ERP, in the late 90s and in the early 2000s. A lot of those systems are very hard to upgrade. If you look at making a change to Oracle E-Business Suite or making a change to SAP R3 or Microsoft Dynamics Nav, for example, often it means changing some pretty deep parts of those applications. And what that often means is that when you come to upgrade, you have to re-implement your customizations. And so what typically happens is you look at how much functionality you're being provided by the on-premise vendor in the new upgrade, and then you look at the cost of making the upgrade and the impact of the business of making the upgrade. And for most businesses, they stick around on the old version until they absolutely have to move up, just because of the economics and the risk around that. And so, Aberdeen found that about 2/3 of businesses are running on old versions of ERP. And so, when we speak to finance organizations, when we see things like the various how fast companies are moving into other countries in terms of having to comply with local tax regulations, evolving revenue recognition, and the need for mobile access and better reporting, it's really hard to be on an old version of ERP when people are expecting great things out of their back-end systems. Another area is, and this is a continued frustration for many finance executives I speak to, is it's really hard to get anything out of the IT team. What's basically happened is it's the sum of those two charts above it, which are really the amount of maintenance it takes to run these things is where all of the IT budget is going. So when you want that new reporting system, or when you want that new time and expense management application, or order management approval workflow put in, well, the issue is that the IT guys are tied up just simply keeping the stuff running. So really the promise of the cloud, and what we see over and over again when we speak to businesses that have made the move, is that they're able to take those tactical resources that were devoted to keeping the systems running and devote them instead to more strategic tasks that are much more aligned with the business. And at the end of the day, that was the original goal of IT back in the 80s, was really to be a strategic function to provide the business systems the business needs. What's happened is that they've ended up basically just maintaining the business systems that were put in years ago, and really cloud-enabled. It really provides that promise of IT and technology spend really aligned with what the needs of the business are. And the final area is fragmentation. When we look at the systems that companies are running, there's often many of them, and what's happened is that businesses become more integrated as they've gone forward. The businesses are much more. It's much less about the accounting function and the sales function and the service function. What you're starting to see, and a lot more, is looking at integrated order-to-cash processes, and or integrated procurement processes, or the website, for example, is the primary channel. It increasingly needs to be integrated with the ERP system, for example. And so the fragmentation that businesses are seeing, the many on-premise systems, the many silos they've deployed, slow down those processes. They make reporting very, very difficult, and also add a lot of overhead to actually maintain those processes as well, executing them. So just again, we asked the IMA actually back in November, so the Institute of Management Accounts, around what are some of the challenges you have with your existing ERP system. And there are a number of different areas they identified, but one of the standouts was really that when you look at your existing GP deployment, or your NAV deployment, or your AX or whatever, that the reporting is very, very difficult. It's an IT-centric activity, and a lot of it's dependent on spreadsheets, and a lot of the information is typically old. So what we're finding over and over again, and in many of the surveys we see, as you probably know, that the finance organization, as well as the broader organization, really needs better reporting and better analytics out of these operational systems they've deployed. The second area was really around ease of use. And you look at a lot of these applications that people are running, a lot of them are kind of Windows client-based applications. A lot of them require multiple touch points. They might have one application for accounting and maybe another application for order management or quote management, for example. So the end user has to use multiple applications, as well as when it comes to changing the application, maybe creating a report or creating a workflow. Often that is not an end user activity as well. You have to go and ask someone or go to an IT guy, and he'll make the change for you. So we saw a lot of frustration around ease of use. And then finally, in terms of point accounting systems, need to be more tightly woven into the manufacturing and inventory process. However, when you deploy those kinds of ERP systems, and obviously they're available on premise, they're typically very, very expensive to do so. So the businesses we're finding are looking at achieving a more cost-effective way of weaving accounting together with inventory, together with manufacturing, and all those operational processes, and making them work together without that big spend on big iron on-premise ERP. So thinking about cloud, and John touched on this a little bit earlier. Really, so when you look at cloud, going forward, it's set to grow about 2x the rate of the traditional overall market. So it really is where business is going according to Gartner. So it's and it's across all the various application areas, everything from ERP to CRM, HCM, business intelligence, supply chain management, and all those various areas. So in actual fact, around that, we actually asked the IMA, where they're focused in terms of cloud ERP. When you think about the cloud, and typically, ERP is a pretty hardened process, right? Businesses have typically deployed CRM first, okay, and then they've looked at their ERP systems because there's a little bit more risk around potentially those areas, or they're a little bit more hardened applications, more transactional applications. But actually, what we found was pretty interesting, and actually, this was actually a pretty substantial uptick of when we asked this question about 2 years before. So about 34% of the IMA, and it's about 500 members on it. So it's a pretty good amount of respondents saw cloud as a higher priority for them over the next 12 months, and only a fraction really found it saw it as a lower priority. So it's a pretty substantial number of, and this is purely around ERP as well. So there's a pretty substantial uptick in terms of ERP adoption in the cloud over the next 12 months. Some of the reasons around this, John spoke about a little earlier on. So the big one that we see is really that move from vendor to customer control. So you think about the days gone by when you used to pay that upfront license, and you get a disk shipped through, and then you spend a whole bunch of implementing, and then you got to spend at 20% year on year, even though you might not ever get to upgrade the functionality because it's just too you're kind of locked in at that point. If you look at the new way, it's really much more about the customer, because at the end of the day, for a cloud vendor, the cloud vendor, you're not paying the cloud vendor upfront for any additional license. You're paying really for what you use. So at the end of the period, you can downsize or you can move up. Okay. Whereas obviously the old way, you're spending on what you anticipate you're going to use. Okay. And then finally, you only renew if you're satisfied with the value of the business application as well. So it means that the cloud vendor is much more incented and much more tuned in around your success. Okay. Because their business is really dependent. 100% of the business is dependent on you renewing. So when we speak to executives at mid-size as well as in enterprise businesses, we see a number of different benefits of the cloud. The first is speed of deployment. So typically on-premise applications can take a long time to deploy. Varies based on the application. But more interestingly is that when you look at a global perspective, often it's when you have very few IT resources on the ground at remote offices. Often you can end up having multiple different applications deployed by different parts of the business. Cloud offers the promise of really deploying ERP very, very quickly globally. Okay, and this is actually what Groupon did. They looked at Great Plains, they looked at Sage, and they looked at the number of countries they need to deploy ERP in. And the only way they could get there with the IT resources they had in terms of getting to one ERP system was really through cloud delivery. Knowledge Universe, they're actually a 40,000 employee education services company based out in Asia. So it kind of gives you a kind of an inkling of the kinds of size of companies that are now deploying cloud applications. That's something that's changed over the last few years. They looked at running Oracle applications. They were acquiring businesses, and they looked at the putting Oracle e-business suite in there, and they found that that was probably going to wipe out a year's worth of profit for them if they put that kind of big iron ERP in. And so when they turn to the cloud, it's really about speed of deployment as well as cost reduction as well. So anything between 30 and 70% in terms of lower costs in terms of maintaining, deploying those applications. Clear Choice, this interesting example here. They're about $200 million dental, basically a medical services company. They had 92 Great Plains databases, so it's kind of a consolidation nightmare. And they were looking at FRX reporting across that, and they were actually looking at data warehouse. And then they looked at, well, how can we move to fewer systems? And they looked at systems like SAP all-in-one, or systems like Business Suite, for example, and to try and get to fewer systems, one ERP systems. What the cloud enabled them to do was to get to one single instance across all their businesses, very, very fast and very cost effectively. And then finally, just pure cost savings. Saigasai, division of a very large Japanese corporation, went from 3% for SAP, 0.1% of revenue to running the cloud. So it's really about speed. It's around getting to one system. It's around really cost reduction. So take you through. Go ahead.
Sorry, we've just had a request. If you can speak up a little bit more, that would be
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm using the handset. I'm sorry. I'll go right into the handset. So just kind of take you through some of the trends here. So these are some trends that we're seeing over and over again, and also what you'll see from a lot of the analysts out there. So the first one is ERP is really going mobile, and John spoke to this in his survey results. If you look in back in 2005 and before, the majority of your interaction with the ERP system was through a Windows client. You look in 2009, a lot about an increased play, and in some cases more maybe some of the employee-facing tasks, but not necessarily the actual accounting tasks. Much more through the web. Here we are in 2012. Okay, so a report from Forbes, Apple's iPhone business is now larger than all of Microsoft. Okay, so it's a pretty profound statement, and it gives you an idea of the shift to mobile. And then you look at IDC, looking forward to 2015, more internet users will access the internet through their mobile devices than through PCs. So really, mobile devices are becoming dominant in terms of how you access the various systems. And so we're seeing that with businesses we speak to today, in terms of businesses have much more distributed workforces. There's the consumerization of IT, where basically employees are accessing the systems from home, okay, or through their iPad, for example. Okay, and so that is that's a key benefit of the cloud. It makes it easy to access the system through these various applications, as well as self-service as well. The cloud makes it much easier for example, to support a professional services team that wants to submit web-based time and expense requests, via the web, or customers that want to self-serve and look at the order status, for example. Okay, the state-of-the-art in time and expense, for example, is where you can take your phone and you can scan a receipt. Okay, right, take a picture of the receipt, and then attach that to your expenses right there and then submit it. So anything that makes your expense submission easier, much easier around that, as well as instant insights as well. That the reporting, and I'm touching upon this in a moment, the reporting much more tightly integrated into the ERP, but accessible through your mobile device as well. So where you can see how the business is performing right there and then, within the palm of your hand. So the second area, and this is pretty much almost a certain trend here, is that analytics is increasingly becoming standard within ERP. So if you look at ERP systems, whether systems like NetSuite, for example, what you have is dashboards and reports and analytics all completely worked into the ERP system. Okay, if you look at kind of older ERP systems, typically the analytics is bolted on. Okay, whether you're building OLAP cubes or you're attaching crystal reports and those kind of areas, what you're seeing is a trend towards the analytics being part and parcel of the application, real time within the application. So when you use the application, and maybe you're approving a sales order, or you're invoicing some customers, all your dashboards around aging, for example, or around sales trends are all right there in front of you, through the web browser. And then that combines with the mobile trends I spoke to earlier on, where all the reporting, the analytics, is available through the device of your choice. Okay, so really the cloud is an enabler for that. The third area is, and we're seeing this here, for example, at Groupon, for example, because cloud applications can deploy so quickly, because you can roll a global ERP instance much faster than you can with traditional on-premise applications. It's enabling businesses to really overcome the consolidation problem much more easily. Okay, so rather than ending up with 20 different instances of QuickBooks or 20 instances of QuickBooks and a whole bunch of Sage Mass or AgPack and that kind of stuff, because your local IT team was deploying the application themselves, okay, or kind of grew into over time. It enables businesses, for example, at Knowledge Universe, for example, to roll out a cloud instance. They can roll it out centrally, and they can roll it out across all their subsidiaries very, very easily. So it enables everyone to be on the same ERP system much more cost effectively and much faster than an on-premise approach. And so it enables the corporate, to consolidate, to see real-time business performance, as well as to get down to the detail as well. And so that we see that as taking a lot of the legwork out of the corporate finance function in terms of that yearly process. The other trend with the area is that there's that realization is the cloud is not necessarily a cure-all, right? So the realization that integration is not solved by the cloud, that 10 cloud applications, still 10 applications need to integrate together. Okay, so what we're also seeing is that businesses, just as the way you look back in the 90s, on-premise applications started to move towards suites, a single application that accomplishes multiple tasks. We're starting to see that trend too, where businesses point applications to deploy quickly, but when you look at the integrated business processes, they don't necessarily help solve that. So businesses and vendors are starting to offer suites of applications, suites of cloud applications that provide everything from financials to projects to web to CRM, and provide the process integration across those guys, and also give the benefits of fewer versions of customer information and more integrated reporting. Another kind of trend here we're seeing is that cloud ERP is becoming really the de facto for today's kind of new companies. So you think of some of those hot companies out there, Lytro with the cool camera that you can focus on in any area after the fact, Roku, Jawbone, Uma, Square, the basically mobile payments company. All of these very newly founded companies, when you look at all the systems they're running, none of them are running on-premise. They're all running cloud applications. And around that, services organizations are now often figuring out how to realign their businesses to factor cloud into their businesses. So Accenture, for example, provides rapid application development on the cloud called their Cloud Factory, building point cloud applications on top of platforms such as Suite Cloud or Force.com, for example. Wipro is packaging up business processes within cloud applications, and then accounting firms such as Baker Tilly and McGladrey are really figuring out how to align their tax, audit, and compliance solutions and their offerings around cloud applications as well. So what you're starting to see are those typical SIs, accounting firms trying to figure out the impact of the cloud in their business. So you're going to see that in your relationships with these vendors you typically work with. So just kind of finish up. So some of the important areas to look for in a cloud vendor. So we asked the IMA, and they told us, well, it's really important the vendor be around. No surprise, the vendor needs to be around there for the long haul. So you want to make sure they're profitable and they have a great track record. And the other area they really told us was around ease of customization. You need to make sure that the application is as customizable as the on-premise solutions, and obviously that your customizations also migrate as well with each automated upgrade that the cloud vendor provides. In terms of a little kind of a deeper dive on that, and this is actually a pretty good list from Gartner. Key diligent points around the clouds. This is from a kind of a recent February report. So make sure that the cloud solution that you choose is going to be able to integrate with the other solutions that you have within your business. So if you're choosing an accounting solution, for example, make sure you can integrate with your CRM solution, or make sure you can integrate with your website, or even with systems beyond your business, such as Amazon or eBay, maybe other selling channels, those kind of areas. Scale and performance, you want to make sure that the vendor can scale with not just your current volume, but also your anticipated volumes, user scale, transactional scale. Keep track of your consumption patterns. Okay, so with cloud applications, okay, you can dial up or dial down, okay, at various points. We're working with the vendor, so you want to make sure you're tracking your consumption patterns and you're mapping your cloud, what you're paying for with your cloud usage. Drill into disaster recovery. You want to drill into those data centers, right, and understand what the backup policies are around that. Do they have multiple data centers? synchronization and replication? Do they do offsite backups in those areas? What are their RPO and RTO commitments, those kind of things? Service level assurances, so understand what the SLA is really around. Is it business hours? Is it 24/7? Is it a full financial penalty? Is it a partial financial penalty? Does the vendor have the backing? Does she pay that penalty? Ensure the security processes meet your standards. Okay, so in actual fact, done right, a cloud vendor should be able to exceed your internal systems in terms of security. But you need to make sure of that when you speak to a vendor. So drill into things such as are they PCI compliant? If you're working across borders, are they EU Safe Harbor compliant in those areas? You may not be with that vendor forever. Okay, so you want to make sure you can take the data out if you plan to do so in the future, so you can export out the transaction and the reference data. And the other kind of key area is cloud applications upgrade automatically as well, right? That's a big benefit of the cloud applications. They upgrade automatically, typically twice or even more often in a year. And you want to make sure that you have the ability to roll to take advantage of the new functionality in the application as new versions come out. So last slide. What we see out there when we speak to finance functions is enables them to stay abreast of accounting change much more easily. So things such as tax changes, revenue recognition changes, compliance in those areas, and anything that's some of changing policy, changing accounting regs. The fact that the application tracks with change, automatic upgrades, is a big benefit to finance functions. Faster, deploy more quickly. You can get to a global instance much faster with cloud. Global organization, okay, often a lot of offshoring going on right now, or maybe people work from home, enables you to support that much more easily. Frees up the IT budget to focus on supporting the finance function. Done right, economies of scale, you get better disaster recovery, better security, okay, and analytics typically part and parcel of the application. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to John.
Thank you very much, Paul. Okay, let's rock really quickly through this second poll question, which I'm just popping out on your screens right now. And actually, this question's missing a word. It should say, what cloud applications are you most interested in over the next 12 months? So yes, we did that in our recent survey. We're also interested in what people on the line today are looking at. Quick reminder, feel free to ask questions. We've got a whole bunch piled up. We might not even get to them all, but we'll follow up after if we don't get to your question right now. And we'll just go through a quick few questions after I close down this poll, which I think I will do in about 3 seconds. 2, 1, closed. Okay. Thanks to everyone who took that poll. Next up, let's hop into a couple questions. Paul, we've actually had a few people ask for the difference between cloud and SaaS. Do you mind if I take a minute and
no, sure, John.
lay that out?
Yeah.
All right. So cloud computing and SaaS, or software as a service, are frequently used together and confused. A lot of people have thought they were the same thing, but they're not. Pardon me. Cloud computing, let's start there. It's the base for SaaS anyway. Cloud computing, imagine a utility, but instead of generating power, it generates computing power. So it's electrical power, computing power. And the cloud is essentially a massive bank of data storage, data computing power that you can tap into if you can connect to it via the web. So the cloud is like utility computing. You can plug into it and, as I described earlier, for our company, have access to virtually unlimited amounts of computing power just for the asking. Well, they make you pay for it. But you can turn it up and down as you need. Now, software as a service is companies providing software capabilities or applications on sort of a metered basis. So instead of buying a licensed ERP system where it's a perpetual license, you pay for it up front and then maintenance over the years, software as a service, you're literally tapping into the capabilities of a software platform on a monthly, quarterly, or let's say annual basis, and that's how you manage your consumption. So for instance, let's use T&E. There are a lot of great T&E platforms out that are SaaS-based platforms. You can buy 1 license, 10 licenses, 1,000 licenses of that software on literally a month-to-month basis. If you do a layoff next month, then instead of having 1,000 seats for the month of December, you would reduce to 800 seats for the month of December. So you can turn it up and down at will. Now, SaaS is delivered through the cloud, delivered through that sort of massive internet with all of this infrastructure behind it. But all you as the user need to know about software as a service is you access it via your browser. So if you're a NetSuite user, you access it via Internet Explorer, Firefox, whatever you're using. If you're using any of these cloud SaaS platforms, then you're accessing it via the internet. They just happen to be hosted in the cloud. So the cloud is sort of this utility concept.
Hey, John, just one very quick thing I just want to add to that is I think you hit the nail on the head, which is the web browser. There's a lot of vendors out there that are kind of like taking on-premise solutions and hosting them and saying they're cloud. I would say that if you see a vendor suddenly saying, well, Citrix is okay to access the application, or if you want to make a change, you got to use Citrix to access this part of it, or you got to, if you want to make an update, you got to use, you got to log into SQL Server and call the vendor to make a schema change. The red light needs to start going on at that point and saying, is this really a cloud? Is this a web-based application, or is this the same on-premise stuff just being delivered hosted? And there are a lot of out of scope for this call, but there are a lot of benefits of a cloud application over a hosted app, especially around just simply accessing the application.
Good point. Good point. Thanks for that. Okay, let's go ahead and hop quickly into questions here. We do have more than we'll be able to get to, but we will follow up afterwards. So what are recommended sources for reviews and comparisons of various cloud-based apps, and obviously cloud-based apps, I would suppose, that are finance, accounting, and treasury related in nature? I have one small take on that, but Paul, do you know of any good resources for that?
I was going to say Proformative is, John.
All kidding aside, there are some websites out there that purport to have reviews of these applications, but I do find that most of them are out of date, and you never know who's doing the reviews, which really bothers me. And usually they're editorialized, and sometimes they're literally bought and sold, and I'm not pointing any direct fingers, but I've looked for myself and haven't found them.
I give you an inside look. I give you an inside look at the process on those sites. What they'll do is they'll send a big spreadsheet to the vendor, and the vendor sometimes will answer yes to too many of the things. It's much better to actually get to a community and can get answers from your peers on what's working for them, rather than go to those go to those comparison sites, because often they're like filled out by the vendor themselves.
Right. So this was not a question that we planted, I promise. But Proformative happens to be really the rare place. We actually have a directory of product and service providers. It actually has reviews of those product and service providers written by folks like you and me, real names, real finance, accounting, and treasury professionals. Unfortunately, we've only had that out for about 2 months, so the reviews are limited. Another thing to look at on Proformative is that we've had tons of conversations, which is what Proformative is all about, on the site. People saying, hey, what's the best cloud-based budgeting and planning software out there? Just go to Proformative, do a search for whatever the application area is you're interested in, and you'll find service providers. You'll find some reviews on some of these providers, and that's growing by the day. But you will probably find a lot of what we call discussions and questions on this subject, and I recommend that.
I think also when you're picking a solution, it requires a deeper conversation. Typically, I think it's where the communities really come in. I mean, a solution that's right for for software companies and wholesalers might not be the solution that's right for higher ed or something like that. So I think it enables you need to have a conversation to figure out the right solution based on your needs. And so that's where Proformative or maybe LinkedIn or those kind of areas can offer that.
And, God, I hate to say it, I can't believe the hour has flown by so quickly. So we have a bunch of unanswered questions. I will work with Paul to get answers to those. In fact, we'll probably just answer them on Proformative so that everyone can benefit from them. I apologize. Let me take care of a couple of housekeeping items because we want to be mindful of your time. Number one, when you leave this event, you'll be presented with a survey. I would really appreciate, we appreciate, if you'll take 60 seconds, 120 seconds, and answer the questions. It helps us get better. We love doing that. Thanks to Paul for your time and insight. Really appreciate your participation today, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, John. It's great to be able to chat to everyone on the call.
Also, thanks to NetSuite. Everything we do on Proformative is free for our users. The site is free. These events are free, whether it's live or online. So we really appreciate the support of our sponsors. They make this all possible. Obviously, NetSuite is a wonderful provider of some of the technology we discussed today. So let's see, moving on. If you are interested in receiving CPE credit, if you have any questions about CPE credit for this event, feel free to email Tanya Walsh. You'll see her email there at the bottom. She is our CPE credit program manager. If you pre-registered asking for CPE credit, you'll simply get your certificate via email in about 24 hours. Let's see, a couple of other quick items here. The presentation from today is already on the Proformative site. So feel free to hop out there, do a search for the presentation name, which is Current and Emerging Cloud Trends, and a bunch of other stuff. But if you just search for Current and Emerging Cloud Trends in quotes, you'll find this presentation. It's what we call a resource. So we've just uploaded it, obviously freely available like everything else on Proformative. And with that, I'd love to bid everyone adieu. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. Hope you all have a great remainder of the week. And we hope to see you at our next event or online at Proformative.com. Thanks, everyone.